Growing through discomfort to thrive in work and life. This episode with Sterling Hawkins is a really impactful one that really applies to all of us, because as long as you're a human being, which I assume all of you are, you never know, I guess, but as long as you're a human being, you are faced with discomfort and uncomfortable challenges and situations in life, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're black or white, whether you are young or old, there's challenges. It's inevitable. And this episode with Sterling really gets at how we can learn and grow and navigate those challenges. Let me tell you a little bit about Sterling. He had a multi-billion-dollar startup collapse. So he had this collapse during the financial crisis, and he went on to hit his rock bottom and then pick himself up again. And he speaks on stages all over the world. So he's a very successful keynote speaker. He is CEO and founder of the Sterling Hawkins Group, a research, training, and development company focused on human and organizational growth. He's been seen in publications like Inc. magazine, Fast Company, the New York Times. He's based in Colorado, and he's a proud uncle of 4. He's a passionate adventurer, and he told us that he loves adventure because it helps him face discomfort so he can be better at handling difficult situations in his life. So get this, he skydives, he climbs mountains, he shark dives. I can't think of a better way to face discomfort than that, actually. And he's even been trekking in the Sahara. So this is such a fascinating and inspirational human being, Sterling Hawkins, and this episode is full of nuggets that you can apply to your life, to adversity, to navigating the situations that we don't like, that make us uncomfortable, that make us feel scratchy, I call it. It feels like it's out of place. It's just not a good feeling, or it really hurts us. It really hurts us. Our most difficult times in life are painful. Sometimes we even feel the pain physically of these challenges in life. The world is going through a challenging time. I would argue it's always been a challenging world. The human condition is not an easy ride, but it can be a ride full of growth, full of evolving in consciousness, and evolving and awakening and experiencing and making a difference in the world. And I hope that you find this episode as inspiring as I did. So welcome to the show, Sterling.
Thanks, Laura. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
It's my absolute pleasure. So tell us about your own story, Sterling, and how you hit rock bottom in your career and grew immensely from that.
Yeah, well, early on, I wanted nothing to do with discomfort, and things came somewhat easily to me. I grew up a 5th-generation retailer in my family's grocery store in upstate New York. And right out of college, I decided, you know what, it's time to spread my wings a little bit. So I started a retail software company with my dad. Now, somewhat long, complex story short, we end up selling it to this group in Silicon Valley where it becomes the Apple Pay before Apple Pay. And we raise hundreds of millions of US dollars, multi-billion-dollar valuation. And have you seen that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street?
Yes. Yeah, a while back.
It's like a scene out of that movie. For anybody that hasn't seen it, picture models in the office, parties at the Four Seasons, the rest I'll leave to everybody's imagination. And discomfort was nowhere to be seen. We had it all. We had the money, we had the patents, we had the smart people, we had the clients. It seemed like we had everything necessary for success, at least until the housing market collapsed. We realized that we had grown in excess of our organic growth, and we weren't able to raise additional funds, at least on terms that were acceptable to the board. And the entire thing came crashing down, and thus began the journey of my rock bottom.
Wow, the entire thing came crashing down. What was the darkest day of that crash? Maybe put us in the situation of your life on the darkest day when all that went down.
Yeah, well, it was almost unbelievable to me because I'm a young guy at the time. I'm in my, let's call it mid to late 20s when this all fell apart. And losing $500 million US dollars was like unfathomable to me. Like I couldn't believe it was actually happening. And for a while, I just denied dealing with it. I would have friends call and invite me to these fancy vacations and big dinners. And for a while, I would just agree, eventually running myself into debt. And even when I could no longer go financially, I started telling people I was just busy. So I wasn't willing to kind of open myself up and be vulnerable enough to get the help and the support that I needed. Whereas I think it was maybe 2 years after the company collapse, I hit my rock bottom where I end up having to move into my parents' house in my 30s. My girlfriend broke up with me. I'm in six figures of personal debt at this point. And um, it was actually that first night I've got my boxes around the basement in my parents' house. And I'm looking at the ceiling and I'm thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I want to do this. You know what it was, Laura? It was like everything that I knew that was ahead of me, all the challenges, problems, obstacles, limits, discomfort, it just felt like more than I could bear. And that first night was one of the hardest at my parents' house. So the rock bottom came a couple of years after the company fell apart.
Wow. And then you obviously worked your way out of that rock bottom, which led you to write Hunting Discomfort. So tell us a little bit more about what led you to write it and what Hunting Discomfort is all about.
Well, I think there were a lot of circumstances at play as to why the company fell apart and why my entire life fell apart. But a lot of it came from avoiding, denying, and just like surviving the discomfort. Things like difficult conversations, things like being vulnerable, things like taking risks and willing to look bad or willing to fail, both led to the company collapse as well as my own. And I think it was within the first couple of days at my parents' house, this phrase came back to me that my mom used to say. And it was really the turning point for me. She said, maybe you've heard it before. She said, the way out is through. It's actually Robert Frost, but to me, it'll always be my mom. And to me, it means you've got to go through the uncomfortable, the painful, the things you're embarrassed of, and what you're looking for is on the other side. And that was a crossroads for me. I said, either I'm going to call this whole life thing short early, like I had my shot and I blew it, or I'm going to see if my mom was right. I'm going to put this thing to the test. And maybe obviously I chose the latter. And that started my journey of looking for discomfort anywhere and everywhere I could, physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual. And I found that my mom was right. The way out is through. We've just got to commit to going through some of those things, no matter how difficult they are.
Hmm. So I agree wholeheartedly. And when you're going through it, it sucks. And and I feel like our brains make up stories so easily that it's never going to get better, right? When you're in it. Um, but how did you get through each of those dark days? How did you keep yourself moving and growing when you didn't have that motivation initially?
Well, I think the secret, not so secret sauce for me and all of us actually lies in commitments, where your commitments actually are greater than your discomfort. And for me at the time, I was afraid of just about everything. But with this big failure on my track record and kind of playing off some of my natural shyness, my biggest fear at that time was being seen. So speaking in public was the worst thing I could possibly imagine. Like Seinfeld says, I would rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. Like that was totally true for me. And I remember as having this epiphany of the way out being through, my email dings, and it's this junk mail from a conference in Singapore inviting me to be one of tens of thousands of attendees. And I hit the reply button and I wrote, "Why don't you have me speak? Best, Sterling." And it must have been a case of I had nothing to lose and a lot to gain, or the heavens parted, or it was meant to be, or I just got lucky. but I end up talking this conference director into being the keynote speaker of his entire event in Singapore, on the other side of the world from me. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. And I remember getting the legal agreement from them, thinking, well, I'm a huge failure. So what do I have to share that's worth anything to anybody? I don't know what I'm going to say. And I'm terrified to do this. But before all that negative self-talk and that self-doubt stopped me, I signed that agreement and sent it back. And it was that commitment, that legal agreement in that case, but it works as a commitment of any kind, that kind of drew me forward, that forced me out of bed in the morning, that forced me to practice, to kind of get acquainted with that fear and start to confront it in that process. And it was giving that talk in Singapore, which I think I blacked out for, by the way. I don't remember giving that talk. I was so nervous. But that conference director did put me in touch with all of his conference director friends. And it was really the seeds, the beginning of the career that I have today. And after that happened, there was not a doubt in my mind. My mom was absolutely right. We've just got to go through those things. And I think commitments are the key to be able to do that.
Yes, what a profound story and not a lot of people would have that sort of courage to be on that stage like you did. And I know how many stages you've been on since, and wow. I mean, and to think that you are shy. It's not your natural happy place, but you have developed the skills and courage to do keynote speaking.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we all have in good times, but especially tough times, is we attach ourselves to information about how things have been, how we've defined our personal situation, how we've defined our personality, how we've defined what's possible, what's not possible. And we hang on to those things for dear life because, well, we may not like it. It's safe and comfortable. We know it already. And it's really having the courage to let go of some of those things, or maybe better said, the courage to commit to beyond them, that makes the difference. And I actually don't think I have any more courage than anybody else. In fact, probably less, given some of the things that I've been through. But all it takes is making a commitment, even when you've got all that self-doubt in your head. And that's what draws you out of yourself, to be able to let go of some of those limiting beliefs tying you back and frees you to reach a greater potential. At least that's how I think about it.
No, I think that's a wonderful way to think about it. And obviously you take commitments seriously and stick with them. So once you commit, you are doing it.
That's right. Yeah, and you know what's interesting too, and stop me if this is too much of a tangent, but there's two different kinds of commitments that we can make, and I think they're both necessary. You know, the first kind are finite commitments, specific things that happen at specific points, and we either achieve those things or not. Getting a raise, starting a business, raising a certain amount of money, anything that happens at a specific point in time. But I think the problem for a lot of us, certainly was for me, is that we only concern ourselves with those finite commitments, which I do think we need to make and commit to no matter what. But if we're real, sometimes we cannot achieve those things. The circumstances of the world might conspire against us and makes it physically impossible. That does happen. And that's where the second kind of commitment comes in. And it's what German-American theologian Paul Tillich would call your ultimate concerns, the things that are ultimately important to you. And for all of humanity, it is not the finite. It's things like love, joy, gratitude, peace, connection, courage. And when we commit to those things, nothing can take those things away from us. And I think it's the commitment to the infinite, the potential, the things that are beyond any finite nature that actually makes it easier to achieve any finite things along the way. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And it makes me think of process versus outcome goals. So process or process, if we're American, I think it's pronounced. Process goals are really about the things that you do on a daily and weekly basis that should directly relate to your higher values, we call them. So the things that you're speaking about are values, what's important to you. But if you continue to progress and do the little things towards your process goals, the outcome that you have set may or may not happen because things can conspire against it, right? So you want to win an Olympic medal. That's a perfect example, right? Well, it all depends on, you may come down with a sickness that day, or you may have a competitor who just had a little bit more of the physique to win that competition. It wasn't your fault, but it's all about what you do to make the process happen, and you will grow through that, and you will be awesome at whatever you're meant to do.
I think so. Yeah, and it's important not to take yourself out of the game. Like in the world today, we all have almost a limitless set of valid excuses. We're in pandemic fallout and global supply chain disruption, global instability. It's almost like this universal instability that's driven by this rapid, relentless, and accelerating change. Like it's throwing us all into the unknown with plenty of excuses just at hand that are valid and real. But it's consciously choosing to not use those excuses and continue to work towards whatever your goal is that makes the difference. And only you know if you're using an excuse or it's something that you're really able to work towards to achieve what it is that you're looking to achieve.
Exactly. So let's turn our attention to the 5 types of discomfort people experience, which you talk about in your book, and how we can use these to our advantage.
Totally. Well, first, I think it's important to say, because sometimes people hear hunting discomfort or conversations about discomfort, and they're like, Sterling, look at my career, my relationships, my bank account. I don't need to hunt discomfort. I'm surrounded by it. But my answer is always the same, which is if you're surrounded by discomfort, you're not hunting it. You're living with it. You're placating it. You're rationalizing why you have to live with those things in your life. When I'm talking about hunting discomfort, I'm talking about getting to the source, the root of what's driving that discomfort and freeing yourself from that place that leaves you forever and permanently free. Not circumstantially free, but truly free. And in a lot of my research and from my own experience, I found that there are 5 major discomforts that stop all of us. Now, as humans, we all deal with all 5 of them, but usually there's 1 or 2 that rise to the top for all of us. Like there's one of them that's primarily standing in your way. Now, the first discomfort is the discomfort of looking at an alternate reality. Now, that doesn't mean that the view you have of yourself, others, your industry, the world, what's possible, what's not possible is untrue. It just means that it's not the only truth. Maybe there's a greater truth, and the courage to look beyond that. And that's really the antidote to it. Opening your mind, or I would almost say, more importantly, opening your heart to perspectives beyond your own that help you see another point of view about whatever you're considering, yourself or what's happening in the world around you. And I can talk through all 5 real quick, or we can pause on each one, however you like. But that's the first one, is really going after the discomfort of how you're looking at things.
Yes, no, that is uncomfortable sometimes, putting yourself in another person's perspective. And but I think that's what's needed. I think we're too polarized right now. We're only seeing our part of the debate, right? And we're getting stronger and more entrenched in our own views and not taking the time to see the other view. And the right answer is somewhere in between, typically. Not the right answer, but the best answer, I think, for a lot of the world's problems.
There's always a greater truth. I think politics, as you say, probably illustrate that the best, because what's always amazing to me is whenever you watch the news or talk with people, like everybody has the facts that back up their point of view. And if they're really entrenched, they're confused about how anybody could possibly see it other than that. And both sides are doing that. And that's been constantly fascinating to me, that everybody has the facts to back up their point of view. And again, it's not that that view's wrong and the facts are the facts, but there's usually something greater that transcends both of those point of views that is more true than wherever either of those sides are starting from. The second piece, the second discomfort that can stop us is the discomfort of self-doubt. And I know this one really, really well. It's that voice in your head that tells you you can't, you shouldn't, you look bad, it'll be embarrassing, you're not cut out for that, you don't have the right personality. And it's that self-doubt that can hold us back if we listen to it. But I think a more powerful way to interpret that is that self-doubt is just telling you what you care about. It's saying, hey, this is really important to me. So instead of using it as something to listen to and shrink away from, using it to pour even more energy and effort and determination into that thing to develop yourself in a way that can show up how you want to show up. And I think the antidote to be able to do that effectively, we already talked about, is commitment. Commitment is the tool we can use to draw us forward.
And you did a good job explaining that voice in your head. And so many clients I work with at Canada Career Counseling, so many people I've dealt with in organizations throughout my psychology career. It's the self-doubt, the negative talk in your head. That's half the challenge. Yeah, it's difficult. And I find that people who are bright and they're quick thinkers, they make up these stories and thoughts even more quickly. So you fire a thought saying, Laura, you're not going to be successful as a speaker. There's too many speakers out there. The market's saturated. And the thought is made. And then trying to combat the thought, then another thought replaces it quickly. It's like a fast moving train in the head.
Yeah. And depending on the people we surround ourselves with, sometimes people will feed into those self-doubts. Yeah, I remember some of the people that are closest to me when I first got into speaking and writing and working with companies, they're like, you can't do that. Speaking's only for high-level politicians and sports stars, and you're neither of those things. And I'm not, right? And I could have listened to that and been, well, somewhere else entirely, but I had made these commitments to myself and outside of myself, and that's what drew me forward. And the third component of discomfort, the third thing that stops us, is about the people that are around us. It's the discomfort, or I would even say the fear of vulnerability, of opening yourself up to actually be seen. And this is another one I know really well. I know them all really well, but these two especially stand out.
You better, you wrote the book.
Right, exactly. I think most people are okay with people seeing their successes, their true successes, and we share about them and take pictures about them and post them all over the internet. But it's being willing to open yourself up to where you maybe missed, or you feel embarrassed, or you feel like you failed, that makes the difference. And when we surround ourselves with people that can hold us accountable, that inspire us, that show us love when maybe we've lost that love for ourselves, and can show us the pathway forward personally and or professionally, it helps us be able to move through that vulnerability in a way that comes from a place of acceptance versus rejection or fighting against something.
Yeah, really well put. And then the next discomfort?
Challenges. There comes a time when there's only so many hours in the day and so much money in your budget. And how do we deal with those very finite challenges? And I find that there's always a strength in the problem, obstacle, limit, or perceived weakness. A great example of that is I thought I was the biggest failure in the world. I was convinced of it when this company fell apart. And I had all the data and the facts, right, to back it up. And it's actually sharing that story, sharing just about what I shared with you on stages and with people all around the world, that what I thought was my greatest downfall has actually become the pathway to even greater success. I think it works for me and it works for all of us.
That's so inspiring. Absolutely inspiring. And the final discomfort?
The final discomfort is one that we all deal with. I think of it as like the discomfort that rules them all, which is the discomfort of the unknown. We are kind of lulled into this comfort with the traffic reports, the stock predictions, and the weather predictions. It's almost like we're lulled into the sense of security that tomorrow is going to be more or less like today, when the truth of the matter is we're not promised tomorrow for any of us at any level. And oftentimes, without addressing that discomfort directly, we're left filling that void with pain, limiting beliefs, thoughts of the past, which usually only serve to hold us back. And when we can surrender to that ultimate unknown, it lets us transcend it. Does that make sense so far?
It totally does. And I think uncertainty scares a lot of people, but the human experience is very uncertain on a daily basis. And all you can really control is how you move through the day that is in the present moment, the day that you're in. You can't control your tomorrows. And I love how you said that. We're not promised any tomorrows.
Yeah. Yeah, Carl Jung, famous psychologist, I'm sure just about everybody's familiar with. He said we cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation about anything, your team, the economy, your budget, your payroll, your boss, your partners, your family, the traffic. Condemnation about anything does not liberate. It oppresses. And it makes it very difficult, maybe even impossible to do much else.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just seeing high levels of fear and anger out there. And it's interesting. I was thinking about how the news is usually negative, right? It sensationalizes negative situations. So you're getting negative, and it's really hard to think of humanity in a positive way if all you focus on is the news. And then on the flip side, social media you go to, and it's usually the positives. It's the good things that are going on, and then you're thinking, wow, everyone has things better than me, right? So Laura's family, oh, wow, she has the perfect family, or right, or the marriage is great, or whatever they see. It's usually the good, but they're not seeing the dark side. They're not seeing the crappy times and the difficult days and the negative thoughts. So they're getting it from both angles. The world is negative, right? Out there, people are generally negative, and the friends in my circle, are doing way better with all that negativity than I am. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it's like we're caught in the middle of that, of everybody else is doing better and the world's falling apart, and I'm somewhere in the middle of that chaos, just trying to sort my way through. And I think, I've met some people in the no matter what community have come over as refugees from different countries, excuse me, don't speak the language, are flat broke, and figure out how to bring themselves forward through a commitment to the infinite, through greater things. And I've also seen it from some of the richest people on the planet. Like, we're all dealing with this human growth model. I think about it. You're probably familiar with some of Joseph Campbell's work, who wrote The Hero's Journey. We're all on our own hero's journey, whether we want to or not. We're on that journey of growth, and it's how we address it, no matter where we are on the socioeconomic spectrum, that matters.
Yeah, and sometimes we think having loads of money makes it easier to navigate. I would argue that it doesn't. And in fact, it can make it more challenging at times.
Yeah, well, I think about it as just it's a different circumstance. Maybe a circumstance that you would prefer, but some of the people that I know that have boatloads of money, they would prefer something else. They wish for a simpler life where people weren't looking at them just for the cars and always wanting things from them, right? So it's like that grass is always greener scenario. And we can live always wishing for the things we want, but instead of living our lives defined by circumstances, good, bad, indifferent, whatever they are, we can live true to what's ultimately important to us as human beings, which, as we said in the beginning, are the things that transcend all circumstances and that matter to us fundamentally forever.
Yeah, you nailed it. And that's what we're all about from in career psychology, is how do we help people find a sense of greater purpose and meaning? Because a lot of clients that come to us are feeling maybe cynical, confused, unfulfilled. They're not getting joy from what they're doing, but they often feel stuck because the mortgage, the reality factors, we call it, are getting in the way of them seeing anything beyond their current job.
Yeah, well, I think of stuckness not as a function of circumstances, but as an unwillingness to confront discomfort. And one of the 5 discomforts we've already talked through. Usually something around the willingness to have a different perspective, because what we see with the mortgage and the job and the family and all the circumstances we deal with is like we feel locked in sometimes. We feel stuck sometimes. And the truth is you are within your current comfort zone. And it's only when you're willing to break that and you take steps and actions bringing you into that discomfort that you're able to break free of it.
Yeah, and that's what some people are able to do, take that first step. Other people, the universe decides for them. A layoff is a perfect example. A lot of people who are laid off, they're devastated emotionally. Their ego is bruised big time, but a year later they say, "Thank goodness that happened to me."
Totally. Yeah, I feel the same way about my whole collapse. It sounds insane to say, but I'm really grateful for that downfall, because not only did it connect me with the things that are ultimately important, but I think these days I have the greatest job in the world. Like I get to travel around and meet with people and help them grow personally and professionally. And honestly, Laura, I would not trade it for the world.
That is just music to my ears as a career psychologist. So you mentioned no matter what. So hashtag no matter what, a system for hunting discomfort in a community. Tell us more about what that is.
Well, funny enough, no matter what started as this personal mantra just to get me out of bed in the morning, back when I had collapsed at my parents' house. And it really was that simple. Like, I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow when my alarm goes off, no matter what. I'm going to make that call to my creditor no matter what. I'm going to go to that Toastmasters club or go to the gym no matter what. And they were just these small steps. And I would just keep repeating no matter what in my head to call me forward, right? To not get stuck and laying in bed all day and feeling depressed and sad and grief-ridden about everything that I lost. And it was a couple of years ago, I was talking with a friend of mine about my speaking business. He's like, "Well, what do you speak about?" And I was like, "Well, I speak about innovation and growth regardless of the circumstances and results no matter what." And it was like this light bulb moment where he goes, "Why are you talking about anything other than no matter what?" And that's really when it changed from something that was just this kind of internal personal monologue to, hey, that's really what we're sharing. And it's that approach, the 5 steps that we talked through, that became what we now call the no matter what system. And it's used by people and companies all over the world to transcend their circumstances to reach that next level. People from all socioeconomic statuses, from all different parts of the world, all backgrounds, circumstances and challenges like you cannot believe. Like, I'm constantly inspired by some of these people. And honestly, it keeps me motivated to move forward. When I'm inspired by their progress, it helps me get back a little bit of that inspiration, that fire in myself to say, oh yeah, that's why we're doing this. And I think that's the beauty of the community, is sharing that kind of inspiration with each other, because we all run out of it sometimes.
I love it. And it's simple, but really actionable and memorable. Or even I can think of myself using it, right? No matter what the state of the bank account is in the business, we're going to keep helping as many people as we can. And no matter what, no matter how long it takes me to get as many speaking gigs as I want, no matter what, I'm going to do that. Dr. Laura is going to do that.
Absolutely, Dr. Laura is going to do that. And I'm here to support. I'm one of your biggest fans, I think, at this point.
Ah, and ditto. I think I mean, you're a step ahead of me. I have a book in me that hopefully will be born in the next year, and I just look at your book beside me, and I think I want to do another book. I love that, and it's no matter what. I don't have the time, but I'm going to make the time. So, speaking of books, what do you read or listen to for your own growth and development?
One of my favorite books of like all time is called The Presence Process by Michael Brown. And it's really a mindfulness practice. Now, I've become a little bit of a growth junkie, admittedly. Like, I've taken more courses and self-growth work from the jungles of the Amazon to classrooms in Los Angeles and everything in between. Yoga, breath work, meditation, like you name it, I've probably at least dabbled in it. And what Michael Brown's book does is capture the essence of most all of that in the most concise way that I've ever seen. I can't recommend it highly enough. And then I also really love Andrew Huberman's podcast. I think it's called Human Labs or something, but it's kind of like all this biohacking, growth hacking stuff from a personal standpoint. And those two things together have been a lifesaver for me, especially through the pandemic.
Beautiful. We are going to share those in the show notes, uh, in my newsletter, etc. Those sound fantastic for our listeners and viewers. My final question that I ask all guests is, if you could have one wish for a better world when it comes to evolving human beings, what would it be?
I think it goes back to what my mom said. I think my wish for all of us is that we have the courage to go through the things that we've been avoiding, the things that we've been not denying, the painful things that we've been through, to free ourselves to reach for something greater. Like, we don't have to live this life out of survival. We can live true to the greater things. And not only does it give you all the money and the accolades and everything else that many are looking for, but it gives you the joy and fulfillment in life as well.
Wonderful. Really, really well put. Thank you for being on Where Work Meets Life, for sharing your own experience so vulnerably, and for creating this hunting discomfort, but this no matter what movement. Really help move people forward and realize, despite the difficulties, challenges, curveballs, the unknown of tomorrow, that we can continue to grow. And the crappy times, the difficult times, are wonderful growth opportunities, especially when we look back on them. But if we're going through them and we can try to pull what we can out of them and pull ourselves out of them no matter what, I think that we will continue to grow. So thank you for bringing this into the world, Sterling.
It's been an extreme pleasure, Dr. Laura. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, and stay well. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Where Work Meets Life. If you found this content valuable, please rate and review the episode and share with others who may benefit. Visit me on my website at drlaura.live and sign up for my monthly e-newsletter full of tips and resources. I'm also a passionate keynote speaker and would be delighted to speak with you on your speaking needs. Stay well.